Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, co-collaborator, and co-host Jim Gurley. And we had an interesting pregame, as we always do. And much like it comes up, the topics come to us in a variety of different ways. This one was somewhat timely, as they all seem to be. And I think in terms of our wheel, I think the topic that we're going to kind of circle around is communication, and inside of that topic, probably talk a little bit about self-talk, which brings us into that self-awareness, self-reflection center of our wheel. And then as you go out in the wheel into the five areas of life, communication probably touches on all of them. But Jim and I were talking about the idea that maybe this is a people thing, a people communication issue, a relationship issue. But of course, it affects your profession, it affects your well-being and your health, and all these things. Communication's a big deal. Jim brought, as he does, to the conversation a framework that he made for himself around communication. I took a quick look at it. I really like it a lot. I think it's what I see, Jim, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. My interpretation of this first pass is that this is a really good idea, how to structure a conversation, almost with anybody, so that you're not wandering away from the actual topic. And let me just read you. It's the AAA method, the three A's AAA method. It's pretty straightforward. So the first A is assumption, and begin by establishing a shared understanding of the subject matter. This involves identifying any assumptions that may be influencing the discussion and clarifying key points. The second A is an agreement. So once you have a shared understanding, you work towards a mutual agreement on desired outcomes or possible solutions. This step often involves negotiation and compromise, which is interesting. And the third A is action. And so after you've made your assumptions and you've come to some agreement, the action is finally to identify the specific action items or tasks that need to be taken to achieve the agreed upon outcomes. Assign responsibility for each task and set deadlines to ensure follow through. Yeah, I can't think of a conversation, Jim, where this wouldn't be a good idea. So I'll throw the microphone back to you, and let's talk about talk.
Yeah, self-talk, probably the most important self of them all, right? I used to think it was self-awareness. Maybe it's self-talk. Reminded me of a quote. I used to use it all the time. It's been a while, but the most important conversation you'll ever have is the conversation with yourself, and that's a crazy person. So,
Yeah, it's funny. I have my morning routine, and one of the things in my routine is surrendering the things that are bothering me, and I've gained a visualization in this routine of mine about self-talk, and it's my inner voice, and my inner voice
yeah,
has taken on the character of one of the seven dwarfs. I'm not sure which, but it's this little dwarf guy, and he walks right beside Jesus when I talk to him in my prayer, and I usually tell him to fuck off, and then I tell him, be nice today. And then he just disappears into the ether. So the visualization is
yeah,
part of that. But self-talk, yeah, talk about a crazy person.
yeah. In simple terms, you have to turn the channel. It's an old radio term, but
Mm-hmm.
if self-talk will repeat itself like a broken record. So
Mm-hmm.
unless you stop the thought and then uh, replace it with something else, it'll just keep repeating itself. That's what self-talk is. So, but yeah, in terms of the framework, like as you knew, a lot of times I'll either get frustrated or for myself, I'll if the same problem happens over and over again, it's just the way my mind works. I'll try to find a tool, or I'll create a tool to fix the problem because
Yep.
it's easier to do that than just be frustrated with the world if things aren't going well. So I created this AAA method, and when I say created it, I just came up with three words, and then I did a Google search of those words, so I had a very clear meaning of each of those words, and then put those into this framework. And so if I'm the head of a meeting, or I have a committee, or with my company, if it's something like that, then I'll start off like this. Hey, let's just all agree that in this meeting, and this could be a 10-minute meeting, it could be a 10-hour meeting, it could be whatever it is, but we have a general understanding in advance of how we communicate with one another. So it's out of respect, it's out of kindness and courteousness that you're not asking the other one to compete to repeat themselves, or when the call ended, there was an action, and the next time we spoke, you're expected to do those things. And if you didn't do those things, then tell us that. Don't avoid it. And same with an agreement. If we had an agreement, then the assumption is that will be fulfilled. And then of course everything starts with assumptions. I find often, and we do it on the podcast, the meaning of a word, even though they may have heard the same word their entire life, may be slightly different to one person than another. And
Oh,
it's
dude, you've heard me say this a million times when I'm talking to, particularly my girls, but anybody, if it's particularly a word like, and I use this example of feminism all the time, right? If we're going to talk about that, then tell me what you believe that to be, and then I'll tell you what I believe it to be. And if we both believe it to be the same thing, then let's start talking. And if we don't, then we should clarify that before we start talking. And that is probably part of the assumption phase, right? And
Mark. Everything I just said doesn't apply to women. Obviously, I'm playing around. Let's just say it's a little more difficult with women because they
hey man, you get like we all have them. I had a mom, I got two daughters, I got a girlfriend, I got an ex-wife, and I understand
well
you.
there
And
you
you
go
said
then.
you weren't going to go there. So there we went. Now get the fuck out of there.
I couldn't resist. Like I said, that
You know what else? You know what else?
maybe hold on. Maybe what I need to do is put a disclosure on this the AAA method. Use at your own risk, but with women, uh, use with caution.
Well, I think in all seriousness, I think the fundamental understanding there is that I think they bring a more emotion to conversations than men do, and I think that's just reality. I don't that's right or wrong.
Yeah, exactly. This
It
is,
just
if
is.
anything, it's a compliment to women because I think you've heard me say this before. We're playing checkers, they're playing chess. So
Well, I think the nice thing, because you started talking about stoicism in the pregame, which is a great source
yeah,
of communication as well, a good way to think and then communicate. But I think that, I think acknowledging all of this seems to me to be about the idea of self accountability, right? I mean, if you say you're going to make an agreement with somebody, which includes steps in the conversation and in term action, and you don't get your actions done, then tell me you didn't get them done. Like you said, don't tell me blah blah blah, excuse, excuse, excuse. That's you got them done or you didn't get them done, right?
yeah.
So it's stoicism does the same thing for me. It pushes you back to the things that are in your control, and it moves you away from the things that aren't in your control, which is another valuable communication lesson. But in self talk, that becomes very difficult for me. My self talk is crazy, as you say.
Yeah, well, if we're getting back to this AAA method, I think to your point, Mark, a business situation is very different than a let's say romantic situation.
Mm-hmm.
I also think we talked about this in the pregame as well. I believe that at different stages in our life, we communicate differently. And yeah, when you get at the point in our life that we're at right now, I think you become less patient with all these. That's one of the reasons I came up with this because I don't have a lot of extra time to waste on going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I want things to be efficient because we're kind of running out of time, right? I'm not 20 years old. Plus, I like efficiency. I also like clarity, transparency, and if you establish this, then you have some parameters, you have some general understanding, and their character will eventually come through. Like,
Well, you're doing that too, right? You're doing that without actually doing it. You're not
yeah,
you're not being obvious about it, but you are in fact doing that, which is very valuable. I think I think as I said to you in the pregame, and you know me well enough now, what I do for a living is I communicate for a living. I
Sure.
talk to people about very important
Yeah.
topics in their lives, like their job and their salary and their family and their home and their education. And it gets deep. It goes deep. And I
Hmm.
was joking with you that I had this shirt on today that I got, and it's a black shirt with white letters. It says, "What do you mean by that?"
Hmm.
Because I ask people that question all the time because I don't know what they mean.
Hmm.
Because I didn't go through the assumptions, I didn't make an agreement, and I have yet to agree on any action. So the power of a framework and the simplicity of a framework. I mean, I spend a lot of time lately, mostly in the last 5 years or so, maybe because of COVID, I don't know. I love frameworks. I love systems and processes and frameworks
Hmm.
because what you've done with this framework is you put a very simple, easy to understand, easy to accomplish framework around an extremely important topic, thereby increasing the likelihood substantially that that conversation is going to be productive for everybody in it. And you can approach that as preserving time, or you can approach that a lot of different ways. It's effective, it's efficient, it's good
Yeah.
for everybody. However, what you said before in the pregame, a lot of people don't like being held accountable. So this isn't going to work with everybody, right? You
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
try it. And I'd love to hear some stories about when it's worked really well and maybe when it hasn't. But yeah,
Like I said,
love it.
depends on what it is. But yeah, I threw up a screen, so I know it's a podcast want to see it, but it gets this is a visual
Yep.
because again, in the center is two people. Things change obviously after three people, four people, five people. It becomes more complicated the more people you have. But again, the number one, you start with an assumption, establishing a shared understanding and clarifying key points, high level. How much time do we have? What are the main things we want to cover? Once that's established, I want everybody to nod their head, yay or nay. If I get a yay, we move on to agreements. But with everybody agreeing, probably don't want to go into the agreement. The agreement, again, pretty simple. Let's agree that the there's a mutual consent as we've negotiated, and we've all possibly compromised or given up something, but we've agreed that moving forward, that's what we all have agreed on. So
Mm-hmm.
again, what I'm really saying is don't come back and say and change your mind and then expect that to be okay, because that's not okay. And if you did change your mind, then at least give a good reason why your mind changed, or was there additional information or something that transpired that you didn't know about the first one. But if you just decide to change your mind, then that's a problem. And maybe one time it's okay, two times maybe, third time that's a pattern, and that
Well,
pattern.
but what I would say to somebody, and I think you're right. I think two or three times it becomes a pattern, but the first time around, the only thing I want is someone's changed their mind is for them to tell me why. What changed that made you
Right. Yeah,
change your
that's good.
mind?
That's super important because
Yep.
then it kind of loops again, right? It starts again. Hey, the
Yep.
assumption is we had an agreement.
Yep.
Has anything
Yep.
changed?
Yep. Yeah.
If
And I
if
think the
they
other,
don't tell you that, and then you go two more meetings, and then they throw it in there, that's disingenuous. That's not cool, right?
well,
That
what's interesting, it makes me think of a couple things. One was this, when I'm training a group of people at a company, there's 10 of them or so, and they're all in a similar group. No one wants to speak up about anything challenging
Mhm.
because they're afraid they're going to be criticized. They're afraid they're going to get fired. They're afraid someone's going to think less of them. I'm like, I remember telling all these people, this last client of mine, I was like, you guys are going up to this door, and there's a person on the other side of the door that you want to talk to, and you knock on the door and no one answers, and you walk away.
Mhm.
I knock on the door and no one answers. I'm kicking the door down, right?
Mhm.
Because I need the answer to the question that I have in order to proceed with whatever it is I'm doing. But I think human nature, in my experience, Jim, as far as communication goes, is most people don't like confrontation, candor, um, matter of factness, if you will. It's offensive to a lot of people, and I think what this does, as I'm thinking about it, is it takes that quality. It doesn't take it away, but it mitigates it. It minimizes it. It almost might take it away. So it serves many functions as I think more about it. But I
Yeah.
think human nature is people don't like candor. It makes them afraid.
Oh, there's no question that the pacifist, or what's the what's the I call it the modern man, right? That's the passive aggressive person, where they don't say anything, but then they're very aggressive in other ways. Those are the worst people,
Oh
because
yeah,
they don't have the
yeah.
courage to come out, put this on the table, work it out. They go behind you and create a bunch of shit storms that cause more problems later. So really,
You're
yeah.
trying to drag me back into the women conversation, aren't you?
Like I said, it's this is not no. I find that some women are, especially in the business setting, are even more effective than men because they're really good at the action parts, right?
Yeah.
Men, yeah, we want to talk about men and women. Again, this is mostly a business context, but so the next one was, I said, agreement. Next one was actions, right? Define task, assigning responsibilities, and setting deadlines. Women are really good at that, probably way better than men.
Yeah, apparently they're better at multitasking as well. I think that the celebration of the differences between people is something that we've gotten away from. I think that
Yeah, but again, market it is so right now. I'm kind of speaking of a business context or some
yep,
kind of a transaction related to, not
yep,
romantic, because when you start to bring the dynamics of a romance, I mean that, whether, I guess, wife or girlfriend
yeah, yeah.
or everything changes completely, and relationship with your daughter or your sister or your mother. It's just completely different things.
No, you're right. You're right. I think that just an awareness of that difference, and maybe sometimes you pursue that and sometimes you leave it alone. But yeah, I mean, communicate. The other thing that strikes me about communication when you're talking about your AAA method here is, I used to go and give a sales meeting on Mondays, every Monday at 9 back in the day, and there was probably 10 people in the room, maybe 15, sometimes maybe 12, whatever. And I what I did one day is I asked everybody to take minutes, like not just one person. I asked everybody, and I asked
Mhm.
everybody to pass them in. And I can't remember this particular time what the topic was. Probably sales of some kind. I couldn't believe it, Jim. I had 10 completely different sets of notes. I said the exact
Uh,
same thing to the exact same people at the exact same time, and I got 10 different sets of notes. If that doesn't tell you that we don't communicate well as humans, then I don't know what does.
yeah,
And and
yeah,
and 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 I have different conversations with different people based on circumstances,
yeah.
So the
This is
framework's great. The framework's great.
you know what's different about the past versus the present and the future. What you said is, these AI tools are fantastic
Yep.
for this type, for any conversation. What,
Hmm.
because I've tested the AIs, and they're getting better and better. But for example, if you start off a meeting and you prompt the AI in the voice recognition
Yep.
with let's just say the three methods of effective communication, or just prompt it as saying, okay, hey, we're meeting today, and then just mention assumption, agreement, action. The AI will then listen to the conversation
Yep.
and immediately create context and some structure to it. That's just the way the AI is designed to do that.
Yep.
So you're right. In the past, one person would just go off and be completely off topic. It's going to be much harder going forward if you establish the framework, because the AI it will be very obvious that person wasted too much time. That's the other thing that's so interesting about the AI is, when we're done with a conversation, it'll tell you exactly the percentage of individual voices. So, for example, you and I actually do really well. Believe it or not, we're like almost 50-50 when we
Really?
talk. Our numbers are pretty good,
Yep.
because I could see the AI on the Zoom,
Hmm.
or I have
That's good.
another AI that listens. Other conversations, you can see it'll be 80-20, right? One person's talking 80% of the time. So you really get an idea as far as,
Yeah. You know what's funny is that now that you bring that up, I started passing out the transcripts to my meetings with this last group of people that I trained.
oh,
I
how'd that
didn't
go?
it was met with a little bit of resistance.
Oh, I bet it
And
was.
and I didn't ask anybody. I didn't tell anybody I was going to do it.
Yeah.
I just said, I'm going to send you the transcript of our conversation. I find it extremely helpful. I think you will too.
Yeah.
I thrust it upon them, and I got a couple people. I guarantee you it bothered everybody, but only a couple of people said anything to me, and they said,
It's changing every single week. A year ago, some people were saying, "Turn the AI off. I don't want it." Now it's like,
"Yep,
what are you
whatever."
trying to hide? You know,
Yeah,
so,
whatever. Yeah, it's but I was gonna bring up another topic that is lessened by what you just mentioned, but it was a conversation I've had with my girls in their businesses about, and each of them, every single person I talk to about this issue has this experience at least once before they learn from it. And that is particularly around the topic of money, because everyone pays attention when money's brought up, and everyone disagrees when money's brought up. So, they would say to me, I just had a conversation with my employee about their commission structure, and I don't think it went very well, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, now you need to send an email to them and give them, this is before AI, tell them what it is that you agreed upon and what it is that the actions are that you're going to do, and give them the opportunity to say, yes, that's my understanding of our conversation, or no, that's not. So
mhm,
it's really bringing your framework in after the fact,
mhm.
um, which is
But it,
probably necessary even if you use your framework. Because even though this framework's great, I'd have a hard time
oh,
believing
it's
everyone
before,
could do
during,
it.
and after.
Yeah,
It really has to be. Again, depends on the context. Because if I'm running the meeting, then I can establish the rules. But if I'm joining a meeting, I can, in a very try to be courteous way, saying, I'm doing this. But again, not everybody wants to use your framework always.
right.
It's not welcome. But speaking, we got a few extra minutes. I thought I'd go over I redid our wheel because
Okay.
it's been a few years, and I updated a little bit. But I also just value it more and more every time I look at it. It's such a simple process, and I think when we first started out, you raised your hand up, and you referred to it as the center.
Mm-hmm.
And the center now has become even more apparent. It starts with the self, right?
Yep. Yep.
And there's a number of different selves. They change all the time as far as priority, but it's always I think I got like 40 of them in the library. But self agency has become probably my favorite one right now because it speaks to taking responsibility. It speaks to taking action. It's all about self agency. Of course, you have to have some self awareness of what your capabilities are. But then I did a couple of updates too. I updated again, no particular order, but profession. It's profession, well being, worldview, people, and money. So
Mm-hmm.
again, this is I appreciate what you were doing when I think you just did it naturally. You held your hand up and you went like
I
this,
did. I did. Yeah, the
right?
palm
But
was the center and the fingers were the five areas.
yeah, but look at how this works out, Mark. So you're right. This is the center is yourself, right?
Yep.
So even both hands, what do you have? Self. Look at yourself.
Yep.
When things are getting weird and things don't make sense, just turn your hand over and look at the center of your palm, and and see the S right in the center. And then you
Yeah.
have these five areas of your life in no particular order. And those five areas, again, it's your worldview, your relationships with other, your relationship with money, your profession, and then of course probably, well, they're all important, but your well-being, and that's your health. And
Well,
so
and I think that they all touch on this communication issue. I think that I'm looking at those five areas, and I think that I probably modify my communication depending on what area I'm in. You know,
sure you do. Yeah,
I
like you
have,
said, we talked about it this morning, right?
yeah,
If you look at the people, female, because that relationship and how you communicate is different with your girlfriend versus say your family, your daughters. It's different.
yep,
And male, your father versus your brother versus me versus somebody else. So
yep,
yeah, the wheel works. It just gets better as time goes on. The money I didn't change much. I thought we got that right. That was money. It was two categories. The subcategories: abundance and scarcity.
yep,
And then within abundance, it's optimic. Excuse me, optimism, which
mm-hmm,
is optimist, and then generous, because I do think that they go together. In scarcity, you're a pessimist or you're fearful. That's typically how you see money. It's a thing, and it's always with us.
Well,
And
you know what's really interesting too, Jim, and I'm on the outside looking in, but I've known you now for a number of years. The way that you communicate is directly impacted by the way that your brain works,
no
and your
doubt,
brain
that's the self-talk. Yeah,
and your brain works different than my brain.
it
You know,
it does.
and that's fascinating to me. I always find I cannot get away from how fascinated that makes me. Just the way that you write, the way that you read, the way that you talk, the way that you think is very apparent to me. The differences, and I mean, they seem to complement us, perhaps
Well,
because
they very much do, and that's the
yeah,
world needs everybody. That's why, yeah, I don't do very well on my own.
yeah,
See, what we need we need each other. That's not a weakness. That's a strength. You know, to have. We'll save this for next week's topic, but this is back to this, mentality and mindset. All those things come into play, but you can never do it alone. I'll finish the wheel real quick because a couple small updates, and then I'd like your thoughts. So the other one was worldview.
yep,
Still think it holds really well. Two categories: our childhood and our ideology. And let's go with childhood for a second. That's the subcategories of that is our religion and our heritage. So that's your nationality, or in your case, or how it was raised, Catholic, right?
mm-hmm, yeah,
That becomes part of your worldview. Your ideology, it's so controversial. It's so sad as Americans we're so divided. It is an ideology. It's almost a cult to some degree, and I purposely put red and blue just because, and I'm sure there's a purple in there somewhere, right? But
yeah.
just by saying conservative and just by using the word liberal, it triggers people like, and so I purposely made it purple. That part of the wheel is purple, but I also am trying to calm down the triggers because
That's funny. That's
yeah, yeah,
funny.
yeah. And
So,
then the next one is well-being. I changed that from health to well-being because I think well-being applies more to the mental well-being, which is a huge part of what's going on. I added cognitive because cognitive, especially right now with what's going on in the world, is a big part of it. So, later on in life with dementia, Alzheimer's, all those different things. That's cognitive, mental well-being, and then and of course emotional, and that could be your mood and just your interactions every day. And then the other one was physical. Of course, we both do our best to stay with our fitness, and then nutrition's huge. So that's part of your physical well-being is directly related to your fitness and your nutrition. And then the one I'm going to talk about tonight at this talk I'm going to do is going to be a profession. And I did change this to self-employed and employed because, again, this is changing so much. And the self-employed is entrepreneur, freelancers, consultants. That kind of falls into the world you and I are in.
mm-hmm,
But an employee is completely different, right? That's you work for a company, you're reporting to a hierarchy, and that's just a very not better or worse, just a very different person and how they
yeah,
get compensated. And then, of course, if you work for the government, whether that's a police officer, fireman, or any kind of government job, school teacher, and I have some very good friends that do that. Your worldview is going to be definitely different than everything's different about that in a
oh
not in a
yeah,
bad
no,
way, just in a
no.
different way.
Well, if you don't know whether you're going to make it home alive every night after work, I suppose that changes everything for those people.
Or
But
just, even a government worker, you don't understand capitalism very well. You really don't, because
you know what it makes me think of? I volunteered at the SCORE office here locally for a couple of years, and that's a volunteer where
yeah,
semi-retired people and retired people go to give volunteer advice. And there's a split right down the middle. There was about 50 people in the Orlando office that served here and there. and you just walk in without an appointment and you get whoever's there. But there's two kinds of people.
There is. Yeah.
One was the person who started, built, and sold perhaps his own company, and the other was the person that managed a P&L of $100 million on behalf of a large organization. And those people think they're entrepreneurs, and they're not, because they're not playing with their own money, you
That
know?
is so, so important. Yeah,
Yeah.
what a great way to wrap this one up. But no, yeah, I know you can run with that one for a while. And again, that's not a criticism, right? That's they just see things differently. And you need government employees. You need people. My father worked for the University of uh, Berkeley, and so later on in my life, I saw, the benefits of also the pension, and he was very good with money and built wealth and did. But on the other hand, as far as really understanding how business worked, because I was an entrepreneur, I always owned my own businesses. We just it was a dog and a cat. It was completely different, right?
When I told my father I was going to start my own company 35 years ago, he thought I was insane.
See,
You
yeah.
know,
So
he would thought I was crazy. He had 35 years for the same company, but he and my brother were both union workers with the Airline Pilots Association,
see,
and
yeah,
they, when they have that uniform on, they can't say certain things. They
yeah,
have to represent the company. So the only other, and I know we're wrapping up, but the only
yeah.
other thing that I wanted to get across, because I find so much power in it in the communication space, and I really think that if everybody could make this word a more consistent part of their conversation, and figure out how to ask it without being offensive, which is not difficult. It's just why, and my shirt. What does that mean? I think that we have a responsibility, or I feel like I have a responsibility at least, to do what you do with your framework, the assumptions, the
Mhm.
agreement, and the action. It's like, maybe I won't call them that. Maybe I'll call them something else.
Mhm.
But I ask the question why. It's like in the political landscape, look, nobody asks a follow up question. It's like the
Yeah,
value is in the follow up question. Like when someone
yeah,
tells me, I say, "What do you do?" and they tell me they're a director, I usually say something like, "Well, what films have you directed?"
yeah,
Because what I'm saying is that doesn't tell me anything, right? You
yeah,
need to expand on that, and
yeah.
clarity is
Well, you'll find
missing.
not everybody wants to want you to know that. Some
That's
people
right.
really feel that's either none of your business or they're trying to hide something a lot of times. So, yeah,
Oh,
again,
dude,
yeah,
I remember one person in my entire career when I asked them what they made that shared with me a specific dollar figure.
yeah,
Everyone avoids the topic. Everyone changes the topic. So
yeah.
no, I'm going to steal your framework. I think it's
All
it's
right, that's great. I hope others do as well. That's the greatest compliment is stealing somebody. I don't know about stealing, but greatest compliment is copying, right?
Well, plagiarism is over after school. There's no longer
Yeah.
such a thing as plagiarism. That's what we do. We all do it. All right, Jim.
All right,
Till
Mike.
next week.
Till next week, buddy. All right.